Geoff, before I talk about the refinery, I want to talk about the issues upstream and what I think can be done to increase production. First of all, I'll say that the Nigerian government today does not have an accurate estimate of the amount of crude oil that comes to surface. I've said this severally, and I stand by it. And the reason is very simple. Nigeria is one of the only countries producing crude oil in the world where the government does not have a hydrocarbon accounting framework. A hydrocarbon accounting framework is what helps the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Petroleum, Ministry of Finance Incorporated, which are the vehicles, special purpose vehicles designated in the Petroleum Industry Act, to actually independently verify and confirm real time, for, aggregation, for transmission, and for allocation to JV partners, the amount of crude oil that comes to subsurface and what is due to the government. So for the share of ownership the government has that NNPC, holds through either JV or independently, I'll say cumulatively it's around 51.4%. Okay? But there's discrepancy between what is due to the government based on the JV contracts that has been signed and the independent assets that are owned by NEPL, which is the E&P arm of NNPC, and what is actually lifted as reported by them in their balance sheet. There's a discrepancy. Okay? So, first of all, the government needs to build an hydrocarbon accounting framework. And that is not just a spreadsheet. It's not a spreadsheet you just build and say, oh, these are the numbers. No. For you to be successful with that framework, you need to follow Section 69 of the PIA, which is the surveyor needs to create a grid system, a GIS, for the onshore acreage in Nigeria. That GIS is the basis on which you meter wellheads. You place meters on the pipes, the aggregation pipes, the transmission pipes, okay? The placing of meters for checking of temperature and pressure as sensors will help you with vandalization, okay? Today, Geoff, because of alternative crude oil evacuation routes, I'll tell you that operators spend anywhere between $12 and $15 to evacuate crude oil, just to evacuate from, where you get it, wellheads, to the flow meters, and then the terminals. So it costs them about $12 to $15. So if they are spending $12 to $15, it's adding to your unit cost production per barrel, which is the reason why unit cost production per barrel in Nigeria is anywhere between $32 and $45 a barrel. In North Africa, in the Middle East, unit cost production per barrel is anywhere between $8 and $20 a barrel. So why is it costing up to $45 a barrel of crude? Because you don't have the infrastructure to measure, and you don't have the SCADA system that will help the authorities to be able to manage vandalization of pipes. You don't have, like Prof said, a good maintenance culture for replacing old pipes, welded pipes. Now, those are issues upstream.
Right.
Okay? Let's come to the refineries. $2.9 billion was allocated for turnaround maintenance. FEC letter was approved on the 12th of August, 2021. Okay? The first four-sale agreements that was structured to finance Port Harcourt turnaround maintenance was $1 billion with Afrexim. That was in December of 2021. Okay, another around $450 million was raised with a company that has a license to lift crude from Nigeria, where NNPC gives the company crude as payment for the cash that was given to it upfront to finance turnaround maintenance. The monies that was approved by FEC in 2021 is enough to build a brand new refinery. So if you look at all the refineries that are owned by the government from 1965, you have Old Port Harcourt, about 60,000 barrels, New Port Harcourt, 150,000, you have Warri, 125,000, you have Kaduna, 110,000. Kaduna has two CDUs, CDU1 and CDU2. CDU1 is, I think, 50,000, CDU2 is 60,000. One of the CDUs cannot take Nigerian crude. The pipeline leading to Kaduna is not in service. The pipeline leading to Warri from Escravos is not in service. Warri has a catalytic reforming unit, but Warri's catalytic reforming unit is not functional. So you can't actually refine PMS. You can produce naphtha, but you can't break it into higher distillates like PMS. The same thing in Port Harcourt. And NNPC data has shown very clearly, like I've said for months, that those refineries are not producing petrol. What they were doing was they badge C5 resins to the refinery, blend with naphtha condensates, and call it PMS.
In other words, you're saying it's just a matter of semantics. As far as you're concerned, those refineries are not doing what they ought to do in the refining sense. They're just doing some things on the side. But for you, they're still not doing the refining, the production as it ought to be, right?
Kayode, there's Aradel in River State, there is Walter Smith, there is DuPont Midstream, there's Obele, there's OPAC. Those are modular refineries, you know, small refineries, 11,000, 5,000 here, 1,000 here, 2,500 here. They don't even have CRU. They don't have catalytic reforming units. The only refinery in Nigeria, and I stand by, and I've always said it, the only refinery in Nigeria producing PMS is Dangote.
All right.
Dangote is currently doing 44 million liters of PMS on a daily basis. NNPC is not refining PMS.
All right, so Mr. Manuel,
they are blending.
I need to touch on this. So would it be right then to expect the price of petrol to come down now that Brent is below $60? Because it said that really when you look at the whole cost, refining is about 15 to 20% of the cost. That crude is a major, cost when it comes to getting out petrol or refining, about 60% or more. So now that the 60% of that is coming down, shouldn't we be seeing petrol at 500 naira?
Okay, so let's do some numbers. The simple way to calculate the price of PMS S-gate at the refinery is basically you multiply the price of a metric ton of PMS, which has a global Platts pricing system, yeah, multiply it by your exchange rates, right? And no refinery around the world can determine the price of a metric ton of PMS. That price is fixed. So there is a problem here. If the price of crude oil is coming down and your exchange rate is dropping, then you have a problem. A good way to look at this would have been the price of crude oil is coming down, the dollar index is dropping, Naira is supposed to naturally appreciate. Why is Naira instead falling? Naira is instead falling is because the central bank does not have sufficient net external reserves to be able to supply liquidity to the market.
Okay.